First up, it's a move that aims at making a steady stream of change to the environment and individual livelihoods. Bengaluru-based NGO Udayam Learning Foundation has empowered laundry pressers on the streets, or Istriwalas as they're more colloquially known, to leave behind their coal-powered iron boxes and adopt LPG-powered ones instead. The organization says the shift has enabled these vendors to cut fuel costs by 50%, add 2 more hours to a workday thanks to better efficiency, and earn 25% more. And all of this while reducing over 6,000 tons of CO2 annually thanks to this simple shift. At least that's what Udayam has claimed. Now, while the organization is targeting 5 cities to roll out the initiative, its major interventions have been implemented in Chennai and Bengaluru. To speak to us about the project and what it's all about, I am now joined by Krishna Ranganathan, co-founder at Udayam Learning Foundation. Krishnan, firstly, thanks so much for joining us on the show. Welcome. And how did this idea come about, Krishnan? Do explain to me, if you will, how exactly does moving from LPG, or moving to LPG rather, helping Istriwalas in both these cities, Chennai, Bengaluru, how is it helping them cut costs and improve efficiencies?
Hi, Jude. First of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. I think Udayam being a non-profit, one of our areas of work is working with nano entrepreneurs trying to improve their income levels. So back in 2018-19, during our early days, when we were working with chaiwalas, tailors, ironing vendors, I think one of the peculiar things we noticed, our team noticed with ironing vendors, was that they were almost losing 25% of their workday just preparing for work. Right now, this is like us opening our laptops and waiting for 1 hour for the laptop to boot so that we can start working, and then repeating that process post-lunch once again. And we're alarmed by this level of inefficiency because it's a huge productivity loss. And now imagine this happening day by day for over 100 years. Every single day, this is the experience they've been having. And when we started looking for solutions for this, of course, a no-brainer solution was switch to an electric iron box. But unfortunately, on the streets, on the footpaths, you do not have access to electricity. Solar was another option we thought about. Again, then and even today, we do not see a commercially viable solar-powered iron box. So that was not a possibility. Fortunately, we found that there was this alternate option of using LPG irons, which was already commercially available, being manufactured, but the adoption had been extremely poor due to various reasons: awareness, fear of LPG, etc. So we did a small pilot back in late 2018, early 2019. And to our amazement, we found that the first 20 people who switched from a coal box to an LPG box, post 1 month, did not want to switch back to coal, all 20 out of 20. So this 100% retention was an eye-opener for us, because that's when we realized that we'd found a product market fit in this space. And yeah, so those were the early beginnings of this initiative, those first 20 boxes that we experimented with. And then, of course, to your other question on how does this work in terms of
so Krishnan, if I may, so I know for a fact, Krishnan, if I may, I know for a fact that this intervention has, of course, meant a whole lot to these livelihoods and, increasing efficiencies. But what's been the larger impact, very quickly, of this shift from coal to LPG? I'm given to understand it's helping cut carbon emissions. Have you managed to measure that impact?
Yeah, so again, there is secondary research material available which talks about how much carbon dioxide does LPG burning emit, how much carbon dioxide does carbon or coal burning emit, etc. So basis that, if you do the math, for one ironing vendor for 1 year, it's about 760 kilos of carbon dioxide emission that is getting saved by switching from coal to LPG. Because they use about half a ton of coal in a year on an average. And now you multiply that by thousands of vendors switching from to LPG. I think it adds up to thousands of tons of carbon dioxide saved.
Okay. All right. Well, it's so nice to see that this intervention has brought about change, not just to the environment, but also the lives of these Istriwalas. On that note, we'll have to leave it right there. Krishnan, thanks so much for joining us because we will also have to cut to some developing news. The Chief Economic Advisor, Anantha Nageswaran, has just begun speaking. Let's listen into what the CEA is saying.
Affordable homes and Swanidhi loans, etc., have also channeled credit to hitherto individuals and small businesses that were not deprived of credit. So all of that at some stage begin to percolate down to the real economy and supports the economic activity. So we don't really take cognizance of these measures because establishing one-to-one correspondence between these measures and actual growth rate in a quantitative sense is difficult, but over time they all accumulate, they all add up to create a dynamism in the economy, and that is what we are seeing. And naturally, in a global comparison, we are doing quite well in terms of the annual real GDP growth rates. As Dr. Garg pointed out, the agricultural growth rate was 3.5%. Both manufacturing and services have done very well. And the manufacturing numbers accord very well with the second quarter bottom-up corporate data we have seen in terms of top line and bottom line recovery as well in manufacturing companies. And as the slide shows you, export share is the highest in the last 8 quarters, and the consumption share of GDP is at 62.5%. So India remains an important market for other countries as well, where India's growth actually supports the growth of other countries because our consumption share is high and we continue to import products as well. So in that sense, India's growth is a net positive contributor to global growth as well. And what about the coming quarters and how things look? And that is the next part of the presentation. Agricultural activity remains robust. Rabi, it is driven by higher sowing in major crops such as wheat and gram. So you can see that year-on-year growth rate is 19.9%. Gram is about 8.9%. And all the green color bars are either the same or higher than the bar for calendar year 2024. The final estimates for agricultural production in 24-25 indicate a record output of food grains led by rice, wheat, maize, and moong. Rice procurement for the current Kharif marketing year has exceeded last year's levels. The availability of inputs remains comfortable. The record high reservoir levels also naturally are augur well for Rabi sowing, which is what we have seen on the left side. Now, how is the momentum in the economic activity looking now that we have 2 quarters under our belt? And as MOSPI's data show, the first half of the financial year have recorded a real GDP growth of 8%. So now we can state comfortably that the full year growth will be either 7% or to the north of 7% rather than to the south of 7%. So that is basically we are saying growth rates will be at least 7% in real terms for the full financial year 25-26. Now, if you look at the numbers for October 2025, e-way generation has grown 8.2%, although it is lower than the pre-COVID average, or for that matter, FY 24-25. I think it is still a healthy growth rate. Non-food bank credit, which was in single digits in recent months, has begun to pick up at 11.1%, higher than the pre-COVID average, but below 24-25, but comfortable level of 11%, higher than the nominal GDP growth rate. Electricity consumption was lower because summer months were not that hot and there was excessive monsoon rainfall, and also now we have a fairly early setting in of cooler weather. So electricity consumption is something that we need to watch out, but it could also signal energy efficiencies beginning to come through. And petrol and diesel consumption is kind of growing at rates which are not too far lower than the long-term average and the near-term average, because it also includes the fact that prices have remained stable. So it is entirely driven by volume growth, which is not a bad thing. So overall, I think the picture looks one of steady growth into the third quarter. And if you look at other indicators such as PMI and fleet activity also signal ongoing momentum. PMI manufacturing is at 59.28. Core industries growth rate was flat in October, but in Q2 it was 4.5%. PMI services higher than last year, higher than the last 4 years average pre-COVID. Port traffic is growing at a very healthy rate. Domestic air cargo was down in October. Railway fleet traffic in line with the pre-COVID average, roughly. Hotel occupancy rate not yet available. So overall, I think, again, as I pointed out, even in the manufacturing sector, which we saw in the second quarter numbers, backed up by bottom-up corporate data, these indicators can augur steady growth as well. In the services side, we'll come to the fact that merchandise exports were lower year on year by 12% in October. I think there is an impact on the of the higher tariff by the United States imposed on Indian goods, and naturally, despite the stellar efforts by exporters to find other markets which have offset the tariff impact, but there is naturally still a residual negative impact, which is what you see in the merchandise export growth rate of minus 11.8%. And the same thing can be mentioned in the case of non-oil, non-gems and jewelry exports, which are slightly better than the overall merchandise export contraction. Total import numbers signal a healthy growth rate, and Dr. Garg also pointed out import of machinery equipment was in double-digit growth. Net inflows in terms of services, again, very positive. Steel consumption, 2.6% in October, but first and second quarter growth numbers were very good. So naturally, there is some sort of consolidation or pullback there. Cement production continuing the good trend of the first two quarters. And the same is the case with the construction and infrastructure goods, which grew at a healthy rate on a quarterly basis. We don't have monthly numbers here. Rural demand remains very resilient based on available indicators. And as the GST rate cuts begin to filter through to the economy, we basically have to make sure that the full impact of GST rate reductions will come through in the data for the coming months as well. Three-wheeler vehicle sales, after 9.8% growth, is recording a 5.9% growth in October. Tractor sales doing very well after two very good quarters as well. So overall, I think rural demand remains resilient. When it comes to urban demand, it is gaining traction post-GST rationalization in terms of UPI transaction growth, passenger vehicle sales, domestic air passenger traffic. These are beginning to recover after contraction in the second quarter, partly in anticipation of the GST rate cut expected after the announcement was made on 15th of August. In terms of investment spending, as Dr. Garg pointed out, the union government's capex grew 30.7%, and the overall investment rate more than 30% in the economy. GFCF, the gross fixed capital formation, if you look at the expenditure-wise data, that is also showing a healthy number north of 30%. IIP capital grew 5.3%. Similar, more or less in the same ballpark as last year's numbers. Capital goods imports, healthy rate of 5%, and sales of listed private non-financial companies recovered and to an 8% growth rate in second quarter in the fiscal year compared to 5.5% in the first quarter, and also compared to 5.4% last year. In terms of inflation, October inflation was 0.3%. Food inflation was -5%. We haven't seen these numbers in a very, very long time. Core inflation rate is well below 5%, it's 4.3%. And the Naukri jobs peak index in October showed a contraction after two very decent first and second quarters this year compared to the last year, second quarter, which was very anemic at 1.3%. So overall, I think the employment situation remains steady. Now, obviously, we are also not reckoning with the major economic reform measures and policy measures.
Well, the CEA there redrawing and recapping some of the big findings from the GDP numbers, and rural demand being resilient, of course, a big takeaway there from those numbers. Well, moving on, what if education could be made accessible to every learner, including persons with disabilities? Samarth by Hyundai, an initiative by Hyundai Motor India Limited, continues to spotlight innovations that break barriers and open new possibilities. Next Skills 360 is one such innovation, which is transforming STEM learning through simple, low-cost tools. Their work is helping young learners build confidence, creativity, and essential tech skills. Take a look at this story.
Coding skills.
I learned Scratch programming language using ProGame